This is the main function of the endocrine system, and you're going to hear this over and over again during this while we're covering the endocrine system. It involves these things called hormones, and hormones are molecules. So what are hormones, and what's the purpose of the endocrine system? Well, it's not just about hormones themselves. How do we produce them? How much do we produce? When do we produce it? And what effects do these hormones have on the body? Now, we unfortunately don't have enough time in the whole semester. Like, I probably teach a semester of this stuff. So many hormones in the body. I'll try to go with the very important one. Well, they're all important because but I'll try to go over to give you the basics of these hormones. And what are hormones? They're basically some sort of molecule or chemical that act as messengers so they're produced by an organ or tissue, and then they're carried throughout the blood and delivered to other organs and tissues to tell them to do something else. So there's these molecules that cause some sort of effect somewhere else in the body. Now the endocrine system, again, this is why I put quotes around this, because this is actually only showing you a few of the organs and tissues that actually produce hormones. So the organs and tissues of the endocrine system, so what the previous picture was showing are the primary tissues and organs. So here are the hypothalamus, pineal gland, pituitary gland. So not the whole brain itself, but these certain structures in the brain. You might remember the hypothalamus from PHYL 141 if you're here for the nervous system. But now we're going to talk more about its endocrine and hormone function. There's the thyroid gland and parathyroid glands. If you remember parathyroid glands and parathyroid hormone and calcium homeostasis, that's the same one there. And then the adrenal glands, not the kidney itself. These adrenal glands are sitting on top of the kidney, and we did talk about this when we talked about the sympathetic nervous system last semester. And the pancreas is actually has a dual role, but it's actually it is very important in endocrine and hormone production. So when you see that previous picture, it's just showing you the ones that are primary endocrine organs, meaning that their main function in the body is to produce hormones or regulate hormones and control hormones. So that's why they keep it pretty simple in that picture of the endocrine system. They're just showing the primary organs. But if we talk about any organ or tissue that can produce a hormone, there are so many different, pretty much almost every tissue and organ in your body produces some sort of hormone. So if there are organs and tissues that have secondary endocrine functions, they have a main function, but they also produce a hormone. So examples of these include the thymus, which is important in your immune system, but it also produces hormones. Your heart, everyone knows the main function of your heart. It beats in your chest, it squeezes blood and circulates it throughout your body, but it also produces its own hormones as well. Stomach and intestines, main purpose, digestion, but they also produce these exotic hormones as well. Kidneys produce urine, right? That's the main function, but they also produce hormones. And testes and ovaries, so they are considered the main function is reproduction, but they're so important. They produce things like the male hormones and the female hormones, like androgens and estrogens and progestogens. They have so powerful. I think they could arguably be classified as primary endocrine organs. But yeah, so when I put this asterisk, I won't say okay, which are secondary and which are primary. And I'm going to ask you to classify testes and ovaries as primary or secondary. I think that's kind of debatable, so when there's a debate, I don't test you on that. So again, testes and ovaries, we covered that again at the very end, but they're so important in hormonal regulation as well. I think there could be a case that they kind of are primary endocrine organs. But again, this is kind of everything else pretty much canon in terms of primary and secondary. And this is from the Martini version of the book, and it's not an exhaustive list either. So there's also the integument, your skin, right? So if you were here last semester, you probably heard about the skin and vitamin D, and vitamin D is a hormone. So the integument, your skin, is another one organ that produces, main functions, protect your body, but it also produces hormones. So it is a secondary endocrine organ. And then, so we have different chapters, and we'll cover now it's very tough to cover all the hormones at once, and I guess This is also why often in med school, a lot of med students don't like it because we cover all of this at once. I will probably cover more of these hormones that are produced by these secondary or endocrine organs as we go along. But just FYI, like these are covered later on. And then adipose, which is fat, it also produces these hormones. And then the liver. Oh, the liver is kind of like it's like the unsung hero of this book. The liver has its it has its hands in so many different systems in your body and metabolism and regulating things in your body. It does so much for your body, but it doesn't really get its own chapter. I think it deserves its own chapter. Back to hormones, the liver also produces its own hormones, and the lungs, like I actually in previous lectures I was like saying, I don't know if the lungs produce the hormones, and then I was like, oh shoot, that's right. I totally forgot about neuroendocrine cells in the lungs. So I'm thinking like if a organ or tissue doesn't, if an organ hasn't been discovered to have a hormone yet, it's just a matter of time. Like I think these were only discovered maybe in the last decade or so. So that's the other thing. If the Martini book doesn't really update itself often, maybe it updates the pictures, not so much the content. But that's the great thing about the OpenStax one is that it's able to, because it's online and it's able to be updated a lot more easier. But OpenStax does have its own like quirks as well. The thing with primary and primary endocrine organs, their main function is to produce hormones. Secondary endocrine organs, they have another main function, like the heart. The heart is supposed to pump blood, right? But they also produce hormones. So that's why it makes them secondary. Like they produce hormones, but that's not their main job. Primary, their main job is to produce hormones. So the previous picture we showed earlier, those were just showing the primary endocrine organs. But if you're talking about endocrine organ as something that produces hormones, there's a whole laundry list.